What's going on, you guys? So we're back at it again with some squat variations. We're going over some squatting 101. Previously in our other videos, we've gone over essentially how to set core to extremity, setting the foundation, setting our stability so we can work on our balance and mobility. Last time we went over some easy self-assessments as far as if we have some mobility restrictions going on, some assessments on your actual squat, not only on a movement standpoint, but also on a unilateral standpoint. Do we have some things that may be compensating and maybe emphasizing one area over the other? The next thing we're going to work on, you guys, now we're progressing a little bit more. Now we're going to actually be squatting. Okay, so what we got planned for today is a simple, working from simple to complex when it comes to squatting. Okay, I'm going to show you 5 different variations of the squat and just some simple tips to kind of, as you go through that, to hopefully allow you to see some progression, but at the same time maybe add in some new variations for yourself. Okay, so starting very simple, you guys, is kind of continuing what we've been working on is just the basic air squat. Okay, so literally starting off, you know, feet outside shoulder apart. Like I said last time, you guys, squatting can be very dependent on your own kind of physiological makeup and anatomical makeup, right? Like nobody is built the exact same. So for some people, it may be feet a little bit more narrow, a little bit more about hip width apart. For some people, based off of either mobility restrictions or based off of, you know, just the structure of their actual hip socket can make a big difference as far as foot position, angle of the toes, and everything else. What I always suggest you guys is start off, find something that tends to feel comfortable on there, that allows you to work through a full range of motion without compensating, without seeing other things that may cause kind of a domino effect of restriction going on there, and then build without that. As you go through these progressions, you guys, as you work through a controlled range of motion and allow yourself to your tissues to open up and your muscles to actually learn how to sequence and engage properly, then you can start, you know, adjusting around, maybe doing different variations as far as squat, or I'm sorry, your feet position, and going with different stimulus on there. In my belief, you guys, we always want to make sure that we kind of find a weak link and strengthen that up, you know, whether it be your foot position, whether it be mobility, whether it be on a weight restriction component on there. Oftentimes I think we get so tied up in only, you know, the simple ways to kind of measure that of, you know, what's your depth and how much weight you're using. More on the side of, you know, in different positions, are you eliciting a different response, and are you finding restrictions in those positions? So, you know, we always want to find a weak link in the chain and kind of build it up from there. But starting on a simple standpoint, you guys, is, you know, easy way is start hands on your shoulders, let your feet start somewhere in there. And then as far as the foot angle, you guys, maybe start with, you know, with a 5%, 5 or 10%, degree kind of turn in the toes, and allow yourself to just kind of work from there. All right, so first thing we'll work on, you guys, is, like I said, a simple air squat. All right, so like we talked about, is looking to set core to extremity, learning on bracing, grabbing the ground with the feet, screwing the feet, setting that fundamental, and setting your structure from there, and simply just working on sitting down and standing up. Okay, so like we talked about last time, any movement we're talking about starts with balance, starts with stability and balance, right? Like I can do anything, whether it's running, jumping, climbing, dancing, deadlifting, whatever I want to call it, is all about balance. And so when we're talking about balance, you guys, you know, we get well, should I have my torso completely upright? Should I be bent over on there? Really what we're talking about when it comes to an air squat is your center of mass is going to be roughly about your sternum or your rib cage, okay? So we're going to work into some barbell and some weight components here in a second, but when we're talking about a simple air squat, is we're looking to keep your center of mass stacked over the center part of your foot. You know, in our first video of this, we talked about the tripod foot. We want to be able to have balance between the first 2 legs in the ball of our foot and the back leg of our heel. Now, when we're squatting down, we want to be able to keep that center of mass via in an air squat, my sternum right over the middle part of my foot. So when I squat down, as you can see, as I squat down, I don't want to get this kind of thing. I see this quite often of, well, if I squat down and get any sort of horizontal lean, that's gonna be bad for my back. Yet again, my center of mass is my sternum on here, so I wouldn't be able to maintain balance. So if I'm in this position here, where essentially my torso may be upright, I'm not putting any tension in my back because that's in an upright position. But as you can see, as my knees shoot forward, as my hips kind of tuck underneath, as my knees tend to get kind of this concave movement going on there, yes, we get fixated oftentimes on what's happening here at the trunk, but yet again, what's the downstream effect of that? I may be stacked here, but at the same time, am I causing more tension here? Am I causing more tension here? Am I causing more tension at the ankles? It's a domino effect as we go on. So we want to focus on stability and balance as we work through that, okay? So as I look straight ahead, I'm in my feet, I'm bracing, I'm going to sit back and down. So as you can see, my chest and my torso are going to drop a little bit, okay? Because of the way my ankles are, unless I have a significant amount of dorsiflexion via that my ankle and my knee is able to come further over my ankles, over my toes, that's going to have to allow me to let my chest drop a little bit, but that's okay, all right? The more I understand how to keep this isolated and engaged through here, that's all right. My back's in an isometric position. There's no flexion, there's no extension going on here. So as I'm squatting down, my center of my mass, my sternum, is maintaining right over top of the middle part of my foot, and it allows me to sit down and stand up. What oftentimes happens is we get kind of an overpronounced of butt sitting back, and as you can see, my sternum is now over my toes, and so your body is like a teeter-totter, all right? It always wants to find homeostasis. It wants to find the path of least resistance. And so if my teeter-totter goes this way, it's simple. It's just like physics, right? If an action has an equal and opposite reaction to go the other direction. And so oftentimes, if I get here and I'm off balance, what happens is now I'm going to use my back to extend up to get my balance to go back this direction, okay? So instead of focusing on balancing down and up, if I'm kind of getting this teeter-totter action going on there, technically I'm squatting, but it's more of a back extension and flexion, or a back flexion extension as I'm working through that pattern. So it's very vital, you guys, to really focus on what is your balance, what is your stability, and where is your center of mass. When you're not using weight, your center of mass comes from here. As you start to implement weight, which we're going to do next, that becomes the object in which you want to maintain your balance point on, okay? So kind of just going to get the idea of a simple air squat. Now, if you're struggling on it, whether it be a mobility aspect or whether it be on a neurological component of you tend to have a tendency to sit down and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, the lights have a tendency to turn out or turn off. What we need to work on initially, you guys, and that's why we work from simple to complex, is not just, it's not necessarily an aspect of your muscles aren't strong enough. It's more on the aspect of a neurological connection from your brain to the motor unit, to what sends to your nervous system that sends the signal how to contract. So oftentimes, because we're conditioned, because we go to the restroom and we sit down to a certain range of motion, like if I'm prone to sitting down to this range of motion, my body understands how to engage in that range of motion. It knows what to fire. It's way more efficient. Where all of a sudden, if I ask it to sit down to maybe a lower range of motion where I'm good, and all of a sudden I feel like the lights turn off and I kind of just plop down there. What we need to work on there, you guys, is creating that neurological stimulus, that motor control of telling your body how to properly contract and keep engaged on that. So that way, over time, if my initial responses kind of crash, then I can teach it, okay, engage, so I can control all the way down and all the way up. So not only am I working on a further range of motion, which is increasing my mobility on there, but more importantly, I'm engaging more muscle and more essentially more stimulus in my nervous system and in my brain and everything else that's allowing me to contract more muscle tissue, which is going to allow me to see a better response. Not necessarily because I all of a sudden get stronger, it's because my nervous system becomes more efficient on actually how to contract the muscle. So yet again, especially if you're coming back from an injury or coming back from something like that, you guys, a great tool is what we call as a box squat, okay? So you can use a bench, you can use a box. I have some clients that use a chair at home, is literally starting off with a height you feel comfortable with, that you can just simply sit down, maintain balance on your feet, maintain that tripod foot, and keeping the knee tracking out with a nice torso position and standing up from there. Yet again, as you become a little bit more adapted to it, as your range of motion, as your system becomes more adequate in how to fire, you can lower that down to a lower box. I can get the same thing, but now I'm increasing the stimulus. So instead of always having to worry about increasing more weight on there, I can increase the stimulus by moving through a more fuller range of motion. That's more length is going to elicit a more of a response on that. So with that, you guys, just make sure once you get down to a lower box that we don't just all of a sudden like collapse. Excuse me. That we collapse and we don't essentially lose tension, okay? If you're getting down there and all of a sudden we're here and we're kind of like rounding the back and we're getting the knees, the valgus knees that we talked about and we're just basically moving improperly, bring yourself back up, okay? Yet again, I think oftentimes we get wrapped up in the distance of range of motion, whether or not that's a full squat or not. Yet again, you are your own best kind of tool on there. You know, what is happening with your movement pattern? Always focus on good movement. If we focus on good movement and building the blocks on top of that, we're going to see progress as we go through all of these progressions, okay? So that's an air squat, that's a box squat, okay? The next thing we're gonna do is a goblet squat, all right? So you can use any sort of weight, okay? I'm gonna show this and demonstrate this with a kettlebell, but you can do this essentially with a dumbbell. You can do this with a can of soup if you're at home. Anything that we're gonna add, we're just gonna put into the frontal plane on here, okay? So what I'm gonna do, okay, I'm gonna take the kettlebell. On this, you guys, you can hold it upside down. You can hold it here. Essentially, you guys, I'm going to hold it in my front rack position, okay? But like we talked about to start, it's all about balance. So now that I'm using an external load in the frontal portion of my body, now all of a sudden I'm changing the weight distribution and how I'm going to balance, okay? Before, there was no weight that I was having to worry about, so I was using my sternum as the guider. Now that I have an external load, that is the object that I want to maintain balanced over the middle part of my foot. So I'm going to demonstrate this with that box squat again, okay? So as I'm through that, all right, I'm going to set myself up in a nice tall position as I'm through here, okay? The number one thing now, yet again, because I'm holding an external object, is setting my core to extremity. So I'm going to think about bracing and engaging first, making sure I'm breathing in my diaphragm and setting that midline. So now I have stability and abdominal pressure to create stability and more engagement around my spinal and my basically my abdomen. All right, so as I'm through here, all right, I'm gonna keep nice eyes ahead, chest up nice and tall. Same thing, bracing tight. I'm gonna sit my hips back and down. As I come through there, I'm looking for my weight the kettlebell to maintain over the middle part of my foot. As I go from there, I'm grabbing the ground with my toes and I'm standing up, okay? Same thing, I'm bracing, sitting back and down, chest up nice and tall, sit down and stand up, okay? Now, one thing I want you to be aware of, okay? I think depends on the crowd that you kind of follow, depends on the information we're seeking on there. But oftentimes we get that we forget to brace here, and right before we go down, we get this hyper extension of the back. So we sit down, we engage, but right before we go to sit, we let the back hyperextend, and we get kind of what we call the duck butt going on. So I get this duck butt thing going on there, and as you can see, all that hyperextension, I'm losing my midline. So as my ribs and my pelvis essentially elongate through there, I'm losing the stimulus, I'm losing all that tension that I'm creating through here. So really be aware, you guys. Make sure I'm sitting down, I'm bracing in through here, I'm setting that midline, and at the same time, my low back and my hips should sit down simultaneously. I shouldn't have my butt kick out and then go through that, because I'm losing stability at the pelvis, I'm losing stability at my through my abdomen and essentially my core, which is essentially going to cause a domino effect of balance, stability, and everything else that goes through that, okay? So that's the goblet squat. The next one, all right, moving up the chain, we're gonna be talking about the back squat, okay? So now we're gonna use a little barbell, all right? So I'm gonna show you from the side profile, and then I'm gonna show you from the front, all right? So what we got Hopefully you can see that. All right, so we use there's two different types of back squat that we use, okay? I'm gonna demonstrate the high bar, and then I'm gonna demonstrate the low bar, okay? Now, depending on your own physiological, or your anatomical makeup and the stimulus in which you're shooting for, each are going to yield a different response, okay? So the high bar, you guys, if you're looking to mimic more like an Olympic lift, more of an upright style of squatting, if you have proper ankle range of motion and you tend to not experience any sort of discomfort in the knee joint, the high bar back squat is a great tool for that. You know, if you're a CrossFit athlete, typically recommend, you know, high bar back squatting, because that's going to mimic more of what you're going to see more with the Olympic lifts and you know, thrusters and those type of movements that you're prone to see in functional fitness. All right, so the high bar back squat, you guys. Now, the part of this is the bar is going to sit on my upper trap, okay? Now, the weight is sitting in my shoulders. So the first thing I want to focus on is setting my upper back and my shoulders, okay? So when I'm in this position, oftentimes we get the arms out kind of wide. I want to bring my hands in so they're essentially just outside shoulder width apart, okay? Now, what that does is when my elbows come in nice and tight, that takes all my upper back musculature and engages it, okay? It brings my shoulder blades kind of scooping back and down. And then once I bring that in, that also flexes that upper trap and creates a rack for that bar to sit on. So if you've done this before and you tend to have that bar kind of slide around, or it feels like it's just like digging into you, you're probably not getting enough engagement on that muscle tissue to actually create a shelf or a rack for that bar to sit on, okay? So the next thing we want to focus on, what I always think about, that is literally trying to bend the bar over my shoulders. Let me show you this. So if I had a PVC pipe, I want to grab it and I want to think about trying to literally bend it over my shoulders. What I'm doing there is I'm creating torque and tension at that position. Because what we're trying to focus on, yet again, you guys, is that balance point. And so if I'm just kind of loosey-goosey in the shoulders, but all the weight is sitting on this, I have to work significantly harder to try to drive my chest up if all of this is just soft and kind of falling down. So the more engagement I can get through that, the more I can pull my elbows down and together on that, the more it's going to keep all that upper back musculature, my rhomboids, my traps, all my scapular muscles to fire and keep me in a stronger position through there. So if I'm in this, if I can engage that automatically offsets me having to really drive my chest up and just engages that musculature a little bit better, okay? So as I get through here, like I said, hands are just gonna be outside, shoulder width apart. From there, I'm gonna step under, unrack the bar. Like I said, the bar is gonna be at kind of that high, in that high trap angle. It's not on my vertebrae, okay? So if you're feeling like this is sitting on the bone, you need to bring it down just a little bit lower, okay? From this position, okay, I'm gonna take my elbows. My goal is to keep my elbows in the same angle as my spine, okay? Oftentimes we get like the elbows pitched under or the elbows pushing here. Where my elbows point is where my angle of my torso is going to want to be, okay? So from here, same thing, I'm gonna breathe into my belly, brace strong. My hips and my low back and my hips are going to descend back and down together. I'm focusing on spreading the floor. Eyes are ahead. Good chest, nice and tall, and stand up from there. Now, my balance point is, if you can see from the ends of the bar, I'm trying to keep the end of the bar stacked right over the middle part of my foot. So if I descend down and my chest drops too soon, as you can see, the bar is now over my toes. And now, not only am I fighting the weight that's on the bar, I'm fighting balance, and I have to try to get myself corrected to get that balance point so I can maintain a better movement pattern, because it's just about finding that line of efficiency. The closer I can stay on my line of efficiency on there, the smoother I'm going to be, and the less compensation I have to worry about. Because even just the slightest movement forward or backwards, now I'm fighting against that line of movement. Now I'm fighting balance and stability as I'm working through that, okay? So that would be the high bar back squat. The low bar back squat, okay, now that's going to be sitting more on my rear delt, okay? Now this one, you guys, you might see more in like powerlifting, if you're prone to be in a powerlifting kind of audience or that. This tends to be a little bit more hip dominant. So the high bar puts a little bit more emphasis on your quads. The low bar is going to put more emphasis in your hips, your glutes, possibly your hamstrings, okay? Now, this is one that I recommend. If you have any sort of knee issues, if you have, if you're dorsiflexion, if you did that self-assessment of the ankle wall test, the dorsiflexion test, and you're within, if you're not in like the 3+ inch range, and your dorsiflexion is essentially, that doesn't allow you to get essentially really anything over the toes, the high bar back squat might be a good exercise for you to utilize, okay? So on this one, you guys, it's still going to maintain that elbow back position, but as you can see, when my elbows are pitched up, I actually create a shelf for that bar to sit on, okay? When my elbows are down, there's really not a shelf for that bar to sit on. So my elbow angle is gonna be a little bit more pitched up to allow me to have a rack for that bar to sit on, okay? Now, I will warn you, if you are a little bit tight in the shoulders, so yet again, if you did that angel test against the wall and you had a hard time getting back there, you might feel a little bit of tension across the shoulders and the pecs, all right? So, from here, my hands are going to be a little bit wider than they would be normally with that high bar back squat, because the bar is going to be sitting down a little bit lower, okay? So yet again, play around with this, but I don't want to go collar to the collar if I have the mobility not to, all right? So from here, I'm going to walk myself under, all right? From there, as you can see, bar is going to sit down a little bit lower, all right? From this angle, okay, so the high bar, our goal was to keep a more upright position, to keep that bar maintained over the middle part of my foot. With the low bar, my hips and my chest are actually going to sit a little bit further back, okay? So from the angle, I am a little bit more flexed, but if you can tell, the bar is still maintaining over the middle part of my foot. So I'm sitting back and down a little bit more, but my balance angle is still on. And if you can see my shin angle, it's a little bit more vertical. So it allows me to put more tension in my hips. So when I drive up and through, I'm utilizing more my hips and my glutes. But because my knee angle is more vertical, I'm not putting so much tension on my knee. Because one of the questions we get a lot is, well, should my knees go past my toes or should they not? It's more dependent on you. Yet again, it depends on the stimulus you're shooting for and whether or not your body will allow it. All right, so in a high bar back squat, my shins want to be a little bit more pitched at an angle. I want a little bit more dorsiflexion, because that's going to allow me to have a more upright torso. In a low back squat, because my hips are sitting more back and down, and I'm putting more pressure back here, and I'm taking it away from my knees and putting it to my hips, that's going to allow my shins to stay a little bit more vertical, all right? So it just depends on your own anatomical makeup, but at the same time, what is your body allowing you to do? I'm one of, yet again, find the weak links and work your weak links on there, but at the same time, find the one that's going to be proper for your own body makeup and see what allows you to work through the best range of motion with the best form. So that was high bar. That was your back squat with both high bar and low bar. Now we're going to work on to front squat, okay? So the obviously back squat was on my back rack. My front squat is now going to be in my front rack, okay? So it's very similar to that goblet squat, all right? So from here, I'm still going to maintain, but the key to this, you guys, is kind of like the low bar, is my elbows are pitched back on this. Now, since it's going to my front rack, I want my elbows up, so now it creates a shelf for that bar to sit into on my front delt, okay? Now, for you beginners out there, the bar is going to lightly kiss your throat, okay? It's gonna lightly touch your throat on this, not to the point where it's obviously like suffocating you, but the more I can get it in this kind of position on there, the less work that I have to do with my arms, okay? Oftentimes we get beginners that like hold the bar out in front of them and then try squatting down. That is very, very difficult. Not only am I talking about balance and stability, but now I'm holding an external object further away from me, which is causing a longer lever arm, which is more likely going to fall. So the more I can get my elbows pitched up and the bar sitting on that front rack position, the less work that I have to do with my upper body, and it allows me to keep my my tension through my abdomen and my hips and my legs, all right? So from there, my hands, yet again, it depends on your mobility through there. As I'm in this position, I'm gonna bring that bar to that front rack position again, okay? So as you can see, my elbows are pitched up. When my elbows drop, all of a sudden that rack disappears, okay? So I wanna make sure my elbows are in front of the bar. Now, one little cue that might help on this, you guys, is like I talked about this on an earlier video, but is instead of having the elbows drop in, think about pushing the elbows out, okay? That automatically brings my chest up and pulls my shoulders back. Now, from that position, same thing, my eyes are gonna be eyes on the horizon. I'm gonna focus on bracing again. My hips sit back and down, chest up tall, sit down, stand up, all right? But the key, especially now that that bar is in that frontal plane, is I really need to focus on maintaining a much more upright position, okay? So, yeah, again, if you struggle with dorsiflexion, you guys, this might be a little bit more challenging because if the knees are unable to go past the toes, the hips have to take the load on there, which means the torso has to drop in order to get that. It's that teeter-totter effect again. So the more I can focus on spreading the floor, keeping a nice upright position, kind of like we talked about before, I'm going to be able to maintain a better center of mass and a better balance point from there, okay? So we're just continuing working up the chain from going from simple to complex. Now that we're holding a little bit more load in that frontal plane, we're adding a little bit more stimulus to the lift as we're working through with that, okay? And the last one is the overhead squat, okay? Now this one, you guys, I wanna make sure we put kind of a big asterisk next to this one. If you're prone to obviously having shoulder issues, we're not there yet stability-wise, we're not yet as far as motor control on this, you guys, stay on the lower end of this, okay? Stay on the lower end of focusing on your back squat, focusing on your front squat, focusing on your goblet squat, and then slowly work on stabilizing with some overhead pressing or some carries or doing something like that, and slowly working on this. You may even incorporate this with a PVC pipe. The thing that I always try to get through to everyone on there is usually when it comes to the overhead squat is the strength level for most people is here, the skill level is down here. And so because the overhead squat, if you're looking at it as the 10 general physical skills of fitness, the overhead squat checks out a lot of those boxes. It basically checks off 7 or 8 of the 10 skills on there because it requires so much different activation, stability, balance, accuracy, coordination, everything all tied into one movement. So if you're a beginning exerciser or beginning squatter, you guys, this one I would put on the far end of it. Start with simple, master each of those basics, and then work up into this one, okay? But as far as the overhead squat, the reason why it's so technical is now we're taking the load away from your body and we're bringing it overhead, which is going to require more balance, more accuracy, and a lot more coordination and stability, not just from your abdomen, your legs, your feet, and everything else, but now through the shoulder girdle at the same time, okay? So when it comes to overhead squat, what we're looking for is hands, yet again, depending on your own mobility through there, hands are gonna be outside, but with this, you guys, the closer the arm angle, you're in a more stacked position, so you're able to kind of set the foundation a little bit more, but the room for air is a little bit less on that, just because, yet again, the closer my arms bring in, the harder it is to keep my wrist behind my ears, and once I can't get my wrist behind my ears, the bar wants to drop as I'm going through. So another one, you guys, if you're not able to essentially get at least probably in that 4 to 5 inch range on the ankle dorsiflexion test, you guys, there's some other modifications that we can do to that, but I would highly suggest be aware of that. Take it slow. Like I said, even if it's using a broomstick or a PVC pipe or working on the other basics, you guys work on those, okay? So from this position, my hands are going to go outside my shoulders. From there, I'm going to extend up over top of my head. I'm going to show you from the frontal part here in a second. But from here, you guys, I'm still focusing on eyes on the horizon. I'm reaching up and back through the bar, okay? So I'm really focusing on maintaining the ends of the bar over the middle part of my foot, okay? So as you can see, as my hips sit back and down, the bar slightly pulls back and down at the same time, okay? From the front angle, I want to be able to show my armpits to the wall in front of me. So if I had a mirror in front of me, I want to see my armpits, I want to see my chest and my shirt, okay? If all of a sudden that disappears and my shoulders essentially get into internal rotation, not the best position for my shoulder, not nearly as strong. When I'm in an external rotation where you can see my armpits, now I'm raising everything from my lats to my scap The one thing that we hear a lot of is like, well, shrug your shoulders. I don't personally like that, because the second I shrug my shoulders, you can see where my hands tend to go. When I shrug my shoulders, the trap muscle, that's an internal rotator. Like all that musculature wants to dump the shoulder forward on that. And yet again, if I'm trying to maintain the bar behind my ears and stacked over the middle part of my foot, the second I shrug, it gets that to go forward on that. So what helps me think of it is, if you were a waiter, you want to carry that weight tray as you're walking around up and through, right? Like you're not going to see a waiter carrying their tray like this. You're going to see them reaching up through the ceiling, through their armpit, the shoulder blades, their shoulder blades, think about just kind of scooping down and under to lock into position as we're in those spots on that. All right. So, those are essentially our 5 different squat variations, okay? We got the air squat, we got the box squat. Well, and all these, you guys, you can incorporate the box squat. If you are experiencing any sort of discomfort or anything in the knees, we like to incorporate the box squat just because it kind of interrupts your eccentric and your concentric movements on there. That tends to take off some of the tension on the knee joint or the hips, depending on what you're feeling discomfort with. But the box squat is a great tool that you can incorporate with any of these variations. But essentially going from simple to complex, going from an air squat to a goblet squat to a back squat to a front squat to an overhead squat is kind of just 5 different easy progressions that you can implement in your training. If you got questions regarding that, you guys, if you got questions over any of the movements in general, let me know, reach out. If you got a partner you love to squat with, tag them in this. Yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback, and take care.